This is a lesson for 3-9. What you're doing today is solving systems, setting y equals to y equals. When we have two equations, notice that both of these equal 8, but it's represented two different ways. Since they're both equal to 8, since these two things are both equal to 8, that means these two things, 10 minus 2 and 5 minus 3, are also equal to each other, because they both equal 8. So I can really take and set one thing, 10 minus 2, equal to the other thing, 5 plus 3, because both of them equal 8. What you're going to have today is you're going to have two equations that have y equals. So we have y equals 2x plus 3, y equals 4x minus 7. What we're going to do is what we just did on the previous slide, where we set the two things equal to each other. You're then going to solve the equation for x. You're going to sub in the x value to solve for y, and then you're going to check your answers. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to set the two equations equal to each other. We have y equals and y equals, so we want to set 2x plus 3 equal to 4x minus 7. We solved equations like this in the last chapter. When you have letters on both sides of the equal sign, you need to get all the letters onto one side first. I like working with the smaller of the two letters because you're working with less negatives that way. So I'm going to go and do minus 2x and minus 2x to get all the letters onto one side. So I have 3 equals 2x minus 7. Now all we have is a two-step equation, plus 7 to get the letter all by itself. So I have 10 equals 2x. Divide by 2, and we get x equals 5. That's one of your two answers. You're solving for both x and y. Now you have your choice. You can take this x equals 5, and you could sub it into here for x or here for x. You have your choice. Whichever equation looks easier to you to sub back in, that's the one you can use. You get the same answer either way, but I would just choose the easier looking one. In my personal opinion, I think the easier looking one is the one that has less negatives and less minus signs. So I'm going to choose the top equation, y equals 2x plus 3. I just think it looks a little bit easier. So now I'm going to take this 5 and I'm going to sub it in for x. So instead of 2 times x, I have 2 times 5. Plus 3. You could type that right into the calculator, or you could do it out by hand. 2 times 5 is 10, plus 3 is 13. So I get y equals 13. That's my other answer. So my two answers are x equals 5 and y equals 13. After you get your answers, then you have to do your check. You're checking to make sure that both of your answers are correct. So we're checking the point 5, 13. So 5 is your x value, 13 is your y value. Remember that points are always written x, y. So we want to take and sub those points into both equations. Just like in the last section in 3-8, it has to check in both equations to be a correct answer. If it only checks in one, you know that you did something wrong. So I have my first equation, y equals 2x plus 3. I have my second equation, y equals 4x minus 7. And I'm going to check in both equations. So instead of y equals, I'm going to have 13 equals. Instead of 2 times x, I have 2 times 5 plus 3. Again, you could take this part and type it right into the calculator if you wanted to. 2 times 5 is 10, plus 3 is 13. So on this side, we get 13 equals 13. It checks. So that's good. Now we got to check the other one. So instead of y equals, I have 13 equals. Instead of 4 times x, I have 4 times 5 minus 7. 4 times 5 minus 7. Again, you could type that right into the calculator. That would be 20 minus 7 is 13. So 13 equals 13. It checks. It has to check in both equations for it to be a correct answer. If one of them doesn't check, you did something wrong. It could be in the beginning of the problem. It could be in the middle of the problem. It could be anywhere. All right. So just go back and redo it. But our two answers here are 5 and 13. Let's take a look at the next one. Y equals 4x minus 9 and y equals x minus 3. Again, we want to set those two equations equal to each other. So I'm going to have 4x minus 9 equals x minus 3. I know that there's really a 1 in front of that x, so I'm going to put it there. You have letters on both sides. I like working with the smaller of the two letters first. So I'm going to do minus 1x and minus 1x because you want to get all the letters onto one side. 4x minus 1x is 3x minus 9. Be very careful. You're bringing down a negative 3 because of that minus 3 in front of it. So now you have a two-step equation, plus 9 plus 9. So 3x equals 6. Divide by 3, divide by 3, and you get x equals 2. Now that you have your answer, you need to sub it back in. You either need to take this x and sub it back into here for x or here for x. Whichever equation looks easier to you. I think the second equation looks easier this time. Y equals x minus 3. So I'm going to take this 2 and I'm going to sub it in for x. So instead of x minus 3, I'm going to have 2 minus 3. 2 minus 3 is just negative 1. So I get y equals negative 1. So my two answers are x equals 2 and y equals negative 1. Now I'm going to do my check. For my check, I have the coordinate 2 comma negative 1 with my x value being 2, my y value being negative 1. So now I need to check it in both equations. Y equals 4x minus 9 and y equals x minus 3. So taking and subbing it in, instead of y equals, I have negative 1 equals. Instead of 4 times x, I have 4 times 2 minus 9. You could type that right into the calculator. 4 times 2 is 8. Minus 9 is negative 1. So negative 1 equals negative 1. That checks. Instead of y equals, I have negative 1 equals. Instead of x minus 3, I have 2 minus 3. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. So negative 1 equals negative 1. It checks. Both of them check. You know your answer is correct. Take a look at the next one. Now this one, instead of being side to side, like the previous one was with the letter and in the middle, this one's just written up above each other. That's fine. You're still going to do the same exact thing. It's just presented a little bit different. So you're still going to set the two equations equal to each other. 5x minus 8 equals 2x plus 1. Again, I like working with the smaller of the two letters first. So I'm going to do minus 2x and minus 2x. Those two x's cancel out. 5x minus 2x is 3x. Bring down your minus 8, bring down your equal sign, bring down your 1. Now it's just a two-step equation. So plus 8 plus 8. So 3x equals 9. Divide by 3, divide by 3, and you get x equals 3. You can take that x equals 3 and sub it into here for x or here for x. You have your choice, whichever equation looks easier. I think the second equation looks easier. Y equals 2x plus 1. So I'm going to take this 3 and I'm going to sub it in for x. So instead of 2 times x, I have 2 times 3 plus 1. 2 times 3 plus 1 is 7. So y equals 7. Go to do your check. We are checking the point 3 comma 7. Your x value is 3. Your y value is 7. So then we go to do our check and we go to sub in a 3 and a 7. So we're going to sub it into y equals 5x minus 8 and y equals 2x plus 1. Remember that it has to sub and work into both of them. So instead of y equals, we're going to have 7 equals. Instead of 5 times x, we're going to have 5 times 3 minus 8. You could type that part right into the calculator. 5 times 3 is 15, minus 8 is 7, so 7 equals 7, it checks. For the other equation, instead of y equals, we're going to have 7 equals 2 times 3 plus 1. You can type that right into the calculator. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7, so 7 equals 7, and that one checks. So our answer is 3, 7. in the next one. So we have another one that we have, this time we have a decimal. Even if it has a decimal, we're going to do it the same exact way. Set the two equations equal to each other. I like working with the smaller of the two numbers, so I'm going to work with the negative 1.5x first. So I'm going to do plus 1.5x and plus 1.5x. Those cancel out, so 4 equals 6.5x minus 9. Now that's just a two-step equation. Plus 9 plus 9. So I have 13 equals 6.5x. Divide by 6.5, divide by 6.5. And we get that x equals 2. Now that you have that x equals 2, you can sub it into either equation. It does not matter. Probably what most people would do is they would probably avoid the decimal. So I'll avoid the decimal, even though I think that one's probably easier to sub in. So we're going to take this 2 and sub it in for x. So instead of 5 times x, I have 5 times 2 minus 9. 5 times 2 minus 9, you can type that into the calculator. That's 10 minus 9, which is 1. So we get x equals 2 and y equals 1. We go to do our check of x equals 2 and y equals 1. Go to sub it in to both equations. So I'm just going to recopy both equations. And now we go to sub it in. Instead of y equals, I have 1 equals. Instead of negative 1.5 times x, instead of negative 1.5 times x, I have negative 1.5 times 2 plus 4. I could type this right into the calculator. Negative 1.5 times 2 is negative 3 plus 4 is positive 1. So that checks. Instead of y equals, I have 1 equals. Instead of 5 times x, I have 5 times 2 minus 9. Type that right into the calculator, you get 1, so 1 equals 1, it checks. The other type of question that you're going to have doesn't involve x's and y's, but it will involve other letters. You do it the same exact way. Here we have b equals and b equals. Well, all that we're going to do is set the two equations equal to each other again. So negative 2a plus 6 equals 3a minus 34. I have letters on both sides. I want to work with the smaller of the two letters first. So I'm going to do plus 2a and plus 2a. Bring down your 6. 2, 3a plus 2a is 5a minus 34. Now it's just a two-step equation. So plus 34 plus 34. So 40 equals 5a. Divide by 5, divide by 5. And you get that a equals 8. Again, just like we did before, we want to sub it into one of the original equations. It does not matter which one we sub it into. I'm going to sub it into the top one. You can sub it into the bottom one if you wanted to. Take this 8 and sub it in for a. So instead of negative 2 times a, I have negative 2 times 8 plus 6. Negative 2 times 8 is negative 16 plus 6 is negative 10. So I get b equals negative 10. When I go to do my checks, we have a and b. So if you wanted to do a comma b, that's fine. All right. We would have 8 comma negative 10. So a is 8, b is negative 10, subbing it in to both equations. Remember, it still needs to check in both equations. Sorry, my pen is not cooperating. 3a minus 34. So instead of b equals, I have negative 10 equals. Instead of negative 2 times a, I have negative 2 times 8 plus 6. You could type this right into the calculator. You get negative 10, so negative 10 equals negative 10. It checks. Over here, we have negative 10 equals 3 times 8 minus 34. Type this right into the calculator. You have 24 minus 34, which is negative 10. So negative 10 equals negative 10. It checks. Let's do one more that has different letters. We have D equals and D equals. So we have 9C plus 20 equals C minus 4. There's really a 1 in front of that C. I like working with the smaller of the two letters first. So minus 1C and minus 1C. So I have 8C plus 20. Be very careful. You're bringing down a negative 4. Now it's just a two-step equation, minus 20 minus 20. So 8c equals negative 24. Divide by 8, divide by 8. So c equals negative 3. You can take and sub that into either one. I think this second equation is definitely easier. So I'm going to take this negative 3 and sub it in here. Negative 3 minus 4. Well, negative 3 minus 4 is just negative 7. So now I'm going to take and do my two checks. I'm going to check C comma D. C is negative 3. D is negative 7. So I have D equals 9C plus 20. So, and I have D equals C minus 4. So instead of D, I have negative 7. 9 times negative 3, when I sub it in, plus 20. You take that and type it right into the calculator. You end up with negative 7. So negative 7 equals negative 7. It checks. In this one, we have negative 7 equals negative 3 minus 4. Type this part right into the calculator. Negative 7 equals negative 7. It checks. So the moral of the story here is set both equations equal to each other, solve for one of the letters, take that answer, sub it into either one of the two equations. You have your choice to find your other letter. Then once you get that answer, do your two checks. It has to check in both equations to be the correct answer. If it doesn't, you did something wrong.